Hola. 3-2, day 2. Let's talk about them applications. But before we get started, let's go ahead and practice that absolute value practice that we have done prior. So number 1, it says the absolute value of -7 plus a -3. So when this is the case, you are going to solve what is inside of the absolute value bars first, and then find the absolute value of that. So using those absolute value ideas as well as the 3-2 day 1 rules, you can choose to use the number line, you can choose to use the scoreboard, or you can choose to use SAC or DSL. Again, for time, as I mentioned, I'm going to stick to SAC or DSL. So in this case, they are both the same sign. So I'm going to add them and then I'm going to keep them. When I add 7 plus 3, I get 10. But then I'm going to keep that negative because originally both of those terms were negative. The last thing you also need to do is continue bringing down those absolute value bars because I have not yet done anything with those bars. Now I'm going to do exactly what we did on lesson 3-1, which is just find the absolute value of -10. Remember, absolute value is a distance, so the number -10 is 10 units away from the number 0. So our final answer here is the number 10. Now, I will tell you that having this step is huge. If you do not have this step with the absolute value bars, you will unfortunately not get the correct answer or the whole problem's points. All right, number 2. This one says the absolute value of -8 and then plus the absolute value of 6. So in this case, you're just going to find the absolute value of each one of the numbers and then simplify them. So they are a little bit different. Keeping that in mind, I'm going to find this answer first. So the absolute value of -8 is a +8. And then the next one, the absolute value of 6 is still just 6 because, again, absolute value answers are always positive because they are a distance. So even if you're walking backwards, you're still going a positive distance. Now, the last thing we need to do is bring down that plus sign in between the two numbers. I do need to have this step. And then the last thing, you're going to add them together for a final answer of 14. Okay, next one. Number 3, again, I have 2 terms inside of absolute value. So when I have 2 terms there, you're going to simplify first. So with those 2 things, I see that they are different signs. So I'm going to subtract and keep the larger. When I subtract 10 minus 7, I get 3. And then because the 10 is larger and the 10 is positive, I'm going to keep it as a +3. And then I'm going to bring down my absolute value bars because I have not yet done anything with those absolute value bars. Also, I am going to bring down the rest of the problem, so plus, and then in parentheses, a -3. Now, notice that parentheses and absolute value bars are very different, even though they kind of look similar. The absolute value bars go straight up and down, while the parentheses are kind of curved around the number. Now, for the number -3, you don't necessarily have to have parentheses around that number, but I just like to have parentheses around that number because otherwise I see 2 symbols right next to each other. I see a plus sign and a negative sign. It kind of just throws me off. So I like keeping that negative attached to the 3. So now I'm going to find the absolute value of 3, +3. It is still just 3 because it's a distance, and then I bring down plus -3. You can, like I said, keep the parentheses or lose the parentheses. But no, the parentheses do not mean absolute value. This right here is just saying it's a +3 and plus a -3. So again, this is going to be a DSL problem. Different signs, subtract them. I get 0, and remember 0 is not negative nor positive. So I just have a final answer of 0. Okay, the next one, back to example 2. Example 4 is very similar. So the absolute value bars are around individualized numbers. So right here, the absolute value of 12 is still 12. And the absolute value of -2 is 2. And our last step is to bring down this sign. So I have a plus sign in between the 2 numbers. Then I add them together. Final answer, 14. Now notice if I were to add these 2 things together first, they're different signs, so I would subtract them, and I would get a 10, and then find the absolute value of 10, so I'd get an answer of 10, which is not the answer of 14. So make sure that you're aware of where those absolute value, the absolute value bars are. All right, you go ahead and try examples 5, 6, 7, and 8 to test your skills on both absolute value and simplifying addition of integers. Sorry, go ahead and pause. Alrighty, let's go ahead and take a look at these problems. The first one, I'm going to simplify what's inside the absolute, what's inside of the absolute value bars first. So between 11 and a -2, that's different signs. So I'm going to subtract and I get 9. And then the larger was 11, so therefore it is a +9. But then you must bring down those absolute value bars. Do not forget those absolute value bars. You must have that step. And then +10 is what I have left over. Our next step we're going to do is find the absolute value of 9, and the absolute value of 9 is just 9, and then +10. Our final answer here is 19. All right, and before we get started on example 6, I want you to write your favorite season up by, or at the top of these notes, your favorite season, whether that be fall, spring, summer, winter. What is your favorite season? Go ahead and write that up at the top. All right, the next one for example 6, we are going to simplify each individualized number and then add them together. So this one is going to be 9, this one is going to be 3. I add those two things, final answer 12. Remember, for all of these you-try problems, make sure that you're fixing them if they are incorrect. There's no need for you to be taking incorrect notes. Next one, this is going to be a DSL problem, different signs, subtract them. So I always take the big number minus the small. 8 minus 2 gives us 6. And then the larger number, because it is negative, I'm going to bring that negative down. And then make sure you also have those absolute value bars, because I haven't taken absolute value into I guess, the problem yet. So then I have -6 inside of the absolute value. The absolute value of -6 is a +6. And then the last one right here, we do again have DSL. Subtracted, I get 7. 11 minus 4 is 7. And since 11 is larger and it is positive, I'm going to leave it as a +7. Just bring down those bars. You can also take this into consideration right now if you'd like, or you can bring it down with the absolute value bars, but make sure that you are simplifying it. So the absolute value of 3 is just 3. And then I bring down my plus sign. Last step here, find the absolute value of 7, which is just 7, so 7 plus 3, final answer, 10. All right, hopefully we feel pretty good with the absolute value practice. Now we've incorporated both absolute value and addition. We're going to move on to some word problems, everybody's favorite thing. So here we're going to write and simplify an addition expression for the situation. Then we're going to explain what the sum means. So remember, the word sum is the answer to an addition problem. Also, word problems, everybody freaks out, right? We don't like them. So I am going to kind of dissect each word problem and identify the important information before even starting. So the first thing it says, the PRT football team, they gained 6 yards on the play. So in that sentence, the only important thing is they gained 6 yards on the play. I'm honestly going to cross through the rest of it. Irrelevant for now. It may come back later, but for now, all I need to know is that we gained 6 yards. Next thing, it says we then lost 10 yards on the next play. So again, that's important. The rest of it, who cares? Right? So the only really important information right now is we gained 6 yards and then we lost 10. So what was the total change of yardage for the team? So I know I'm trying to find the total. So whenever you're finding total, most of the time you're going to add the two things together. Also, it says write and simplify an addition expression. So I'm going to have two numbers and I'm going to add the two numbers together. So the first thing, if I'm gaining 6 yards, you got to determine if that's positive or negative. If I gain 6, that is going to be a positive number. So we gained 6 yards. Okay, then it says we lost 10. If you're losing money, you're going into negatives. Or if you're losing yardage, you're going backwards. So therefore, this right here is a -10. You must have this addition expression. And then you can start simplifying it. Now, notice, in this entire notes that we have taken so far, both day 1 and day 2, whenever we are dealing with expressions, don't you dare write an equal sign. Okay, equals is an equation, and we haven't touched any equations. You won't actually do any sort of equations for a very long time. So make sure you're keeping those equal signs out of here. We do not want them. You're just simplifying, which means, yes, you're combining them, but your final answer, just go ahead and write the number. Don't put equals, whatever. Okay, once I have this written down, keep that. Then you are going to determine if you are adding or subtracting the two. So here, because they're different signs, I'm going to subtract them. So when I take 10 minus 6, I get 4. So my final answer is 4 so far. Then I'm going to look at the larger number. Because I put the number 10 first, I know that 10 is larger. So I put the L above that term as well. You can choose if you would like to do that or not. So therefore, our final answer is actually a -4. And notice I didn't put an equal sign. line right there on that final answer. Yes, I did here, but that's just me explaining how to get the number 4. So our final answer is -4. What does the change in yardage mean? We're going to say overall, the PRT football team did they gain or lose? Well, hopefully we know because this is a negative that we lost yards. So we're going to say the PRT football team lost 4 yards. Notice that I have indicated the label of yards. I've also indicated whether it was a gain or a loss to represent that negative number. In your sentence, do not ever put a -4 yards. Like you want to say the team lost. The word lost represents that negative symbol. All right, next one. Actually, you are going to try this one on your own. So write and simplify an addition expression for the sand volleyball tournament. So during the sand volleyball tournament last Saturday, the temperature dropped 2 degrees, and then it rose 3 degrees. How did the temperature end at the tournament compared to the starting temperature? So again, you need to identify the important information, and then you go ahead and fill in this addition expression with the appropriate terms. Okay, go ahead and pause. All right, so hopefully we got that dropped 2 degrees represents a -2. And then we rose 3 degrees represents a +3. So hopefully this was your addition expression. Also, if you would like, again, you could have also gotten rid of all of the other silly info. Then the last thing, it says, how did the temperature at the end of the tournament compare to the starting temperature? Notice last time I used the phrase overall. Make sure that you have indicated some sort of like after everything happened or at the end of the day, because don't just say we lost 4 yards up above. You need to kind of summarize the entire scenario. So we're going to do that here. And we're actually going to use this phrase right here. That's fine. So at the end of the tournament, please do that with me. Of the tournament. And then what happened? So if I lost 2 degrees or dropped 2 degrees, and then we rose 3 degrees, they're different signs, I subtract them. 3 minus 2 gives us an answer of 1 because this is a larger. That is our final answer. So at the end of the tournament, the temperature, and again, just use those words that are in the sentence. There's no reason for you to have to come up with other words. Just steal those words out of the sentence. So it says the temperature rose 1 degree. You have to indicate whether it is a positive or negative. So you either needed to tell me that it dropped or it rose, depending on that problem. All right, the last thing, the summary part. I want you to go ahead and answer the summary because it says, why might you not necessarily add the integers in the order that they appear in an addition problem? So I'm going to give you an example. If you have something like -4 plus 7 plus 12, why might you not necessarily add the integers in the order that they appear? Well, some of us don't love that these are different signs right here. So instead, you are allowed to go ahead and add these two numbers together first, if you would like, just because you can see it's addition, and then simplify out that -4 or take away -4. All right, hopefully we feel pretty good with 3-2 day 2 notes. Let's do them problems tomorrow.